Today I am coming to you from the property professor's office. I feel like I've taken over the boss's chair, but thank you very much for having me in your home. To introduce Peter Koulizos, Mr. Peter Koulizos, he's very infamous in all of Australia. He holds a teaching degree, graduate diploma in property, masters of business in property, and master of urban and regional planning. He has been teaching in real estate and investment for over 20 years. Peter also personally develops and invests in property and currently owns several properties. I'd say probably more. Peter has the ability to combine the theory of property investment with the practical aspects so as to teach people how to make money for themselves from investing in property, whether they be buying, selling, renting, renovating, or developing property. He is a regular on TV. He is sought after for his expertise. In my opinion, he's a bit of a prophecy when it comes to real estate. So it's my honor to have him on the show today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ria, for the invitation.
No, it's been long overdue, I'd say.
We've talked about it for a long time.
We have. So let's introduce you a little bit more to everyone. I mean, obviously, what you do, it speaks for itself. But take us back to your initial interest in property. Like, where did that all stem from?
So, I mean, without me knowing it, it started when I was a little kid, I reckon, because my father was a real estate agent. So we would be talking about real estate over the dinner table anyway. So for us, it was, common conversation. It was nothing special. And mum and dad being newly arrived migrants to Australia, really saw Australia as a land of opportunity. And, here it was, it wasn't, can I get a job? It's how many jobs would you like? And so they would often work 2 or 3 jobs and they bought themselves a home. And then they bought some investment property after that. So for me, it started in my very early years.
That's wonderful. So your father got into real estate as a manager or
he came to Australia when he was 25, worked in factories because he didn't know the language. But then while he was working in a factory, he went to night school and became a real estate salesperson. So he worked for other people, didn't run his own agency. And then he went into selling real estate and then buying and selling. He did a lot of speculation back then. Back in the 70s, there was no capital gains tax, so you can buy and sell and not pay any tax. And during the 70s, a bit like the property boom we've just had recently, you could buy something and then a few months later it'd be worth more anyway. And so it was very easy to speculate back then.
That's great. What a time to not have to pay capital gains tax. So that's very interesting because was your father very transparent in his dealings? Look,
with discussions that I have with my students or people at a social event, a lot of people are guarded about what they own. And I understand that. In some cultures, it's a no-no to talk about your wealth or money. In other cultures, they speak about it, not like they're bragging, but it's just, it's a bit like talking about sport or, which football team you follow. And so, we talked about it openly. There was, no secrets. If Dad had bought another property or if he was renovating it, he'd often ask me for help. But, keeping in mind I'm a little kid, so I can't do much. But certainly throwing stuff on the trailer, throwing rubbish on the trailer or pulling out weeds I could do. It was just normal part of life. That's what you did.
So that, I guess, brewed the interest and appreciation of
I didn't realize it because often we don't listen to our parents. But just through a process of osmosis, I took everything in, not knowing it. And then my first teaching job was out in the country and we bought a house. I mean, one of the reasons we bought a house is a bit like now because there was nothing to rent. Right. So at the moment, tenants are finding it really hard. But we had a bit of a deposit. And so we bought a house, but it was in a country town. There wasn't many choices. So we bought. But then it wasn't until about 5 or 6 years later that we bought our first investment property, which happened to be in that country town. But it was then that what what we had talked about 10, 15 years ago had started coming back about make sure you pick the right location, make sure people want to live there and pay your rent and stuff like that. So yeah, it was, you know, without me knowing, I was in school. I was in property school.
Yeah. So once you got your first teaching job, so obviously you went to university first, secured the job, and obviously as a top priority, it would have been anyway, even if it wasn't no rental properties, you probably would have been looking for a house to buy pretty quick smart.
Yeah. Rent money is dead money. I'm a big believer in that. I mean, a lot of people talk about rent vesting, but you know, rather than rent vesting, why don't you just buy yourself another property?
And then so you've got that first taste of the first rental property.
Yeah, no, I mean, probably if I look back, the thing that I should have done was had a plan. Was had a property plan. So, you know, I want to finish up with either this many properties or that much worth of properties. I need to do this. We just, when the opportunities arose, we just bought them. If we had enough money and we felt it was right, then we would buy it. Actually, the next investment is probably more newsworthy, because the next investment was a speculation. So we bought a property, fixed it up. We also got planning approval to build something at the back, and then we sold it. But I didn't have any money. So I spoke to my wife's 3 brothers, so my brothers-in-law, and I said to them, if you each give me $6,000, right, as a deposit for the property, we'll buy the property, I'll coordinate fixing it up, I'll coordinate getting planning approval to build 2 at the back and retain the house. And then we'll sell it. And in theory, you'll get your $6,000 back plus another $6,000 in profit, right? Yeah. Now, 6,000 doesn't sound a lot, but we're talking early 90s, right? Yeah. But I didn't have any money. So I had to borrow my 6,000 from one of my brothers-in-law. And so we put all that together. And it's like thinking outside the box. So people would think, well, you don't have any money, you can't do anything. Well, no, you can. Yeah. It's a little bit like a joint venture. Yeah. Yeah. So because I didn't have the money, I said, all right, well, I'll do the extra work, because I know people that can. I know gardeners, I know painters, I know how to get the planning approval. And so, yeah, that really got us started on our active investing. So like buying and holding is just very passive, and that's what mum and dad had done. So I thought that's what I need to do. But that was our first active investment, where you buy, add value, and then sell. Yeah. And your first property development. That's right. And interestingly, development doesn't necessarily mean build. Development can just mean land division, divide land. Okay. Because that's actually where most of the money is. The value in real estate's in the land. You'll make much more money just by subdividing land than subdividing and then building and then selling, especially in this market, because building costs are unknown. Yes, absolutely. And that is something that I've learned from you. It's something that not many people know is I've done one of Peter's courses, his property development course at TAFE. And I learned that because we learned how to run the numbers. And, you know, most mum and dad developers or most people think I'll just buy land, subdivide it, build, and I'll make profit. But then when you run the numbers, like exactly what you said, sometimes it's better off just to divide the land and sell it, because after you look at all the building costs and everything, it's like, well, all the time and effort, it's actually not worth it. So you're better off going to find another block of land to subdivide rather than wait a year for the thing to be built. Yeah. But obviously when you did your first, I'm assuming a hammerhead style development. Well, yeah, we never actually built it. We just got the approval to do it. That's even more clever. Yeah. And I love that, the thinking outside of the box, you know, like, as you said, you didn't have the money to do anything at that stage, but you thought, well, I know what I can do. I just need enough people to believe in me and help me get it going. So that's really wonderful. So at this stage, because you were not a teacher in development at that stage, or in no. So I started off as a primary school teacher. Yeah. And so my first few years were out in the country, and then I got a shift to the city, and I taught in a number of primary schools in the city. And I really love school teaching. And even today, there are still some things that I miss about it. There are some things that I don't, like staff meetings and writing school reports. I do not miss that. But then I got to an age, it was actually 40, and my three best friends, we all, at the same age, we all took different directions in our careers. Now, I don't know if that was fluke or early midlife crisis, who knows. But, you know, I sat down actually with a career counsellor and worked out that my two passions are property and teaching. So how about if we put them together? And so I started at what we call in South Australia the WEA, which is adult education. In Victoria, I think they call it ACE, which is adult community education. So it's very informal education. You can go there to learn how to do bookkeeping or play the drums, you know, many different things. Yeah. And so I just started writing and teaching some informal courses there. But you know, to anyone take me seriously, I needed some qualifications in property. And so whilst I was still teaching full time, I also went back to uni part time to start on my postgraduate courses in property and town planning.
Nice. And it's kind of a win-win situation, really. I mean, you're passionate about it, you're learning more. Now you're learning all the intricate details and the ins and outs of the industry, which is helping you with your own portfolio.
Yeah, so, you know, I mean, I'm very passionate and I love my work. So people say if you love your work, you don't really have a job, you know. And so, yeah, and what I learned professionally also helps me personally. And what I learned personally, I can also share professionally with the students in class.
Yeah, definitely. On a side note, when we did the property development course, you actually took us out on a day trip. And, well, not really a day trip, but I guess a practical excursion to take the classroom knowledge and apply it in real life situations. So much so that we went to an auction where you actually bought the house.
It was actually, so you were on the last field trip I did when I was at TAFE.
Yeah.
And it was in Brooklyn Park, which is where you live now. And yeah, it's a bit of out of the box thinking, because I didn't want to buy it. But my daughter, we have 4 kids, daughter number 2, we thought it would be a good investment for her because she had already had a good full-time job, good income, but she couldn't buy it on her own. So I said, all right, we'll go 50-50. You put in 50% of the deposit, I'll put in 50% of the deposit. Yeah, and at that auction, we bought it. And to fast track 3 years, we've sold it, but we sold it to daughter number 3.
Nice.
Yeah, because it's a character house on a good sized block of land in a western suburb. So it was, for me, I felt it was too good a property to leave the family.
Yeah.
So we passed it on. But I still do field trips at uni. Like I run the Master of Property at Adelaide Uni. And I've actually just written a new course which incorporates a field trip because, you know, I can talk till the cows come home in class, but I don't think it's really cemented in their minds until they actually see it. So I talk about auctions. Right? Well, on the field trip, we go to an auction.
Yeah.
And the last one that we had, it was terrific because the auctioneer, AJ, as he's affectionately known in Adelaide, he took the time and spoke to the students before the auction. Oh. He said, this is how much interest we've got registered. See those 2 there, they're the ones that will probably bid. And then he came back after the auction and told us how it went and why he did certain things. You know, that sort of stuff you're not going to learn from a textbook.
No, I love that. That's invaluable. I mean, honestly, seeing you in action in the bidding, that was the first time I've seen Peter bidding now quite a few times, but the first time I was like, wow, he's the real deal. You know, it's
scary. I mean, I might look calm, but you know, you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more.
Yeah.
And then, you know, for me anyway, buyer's remorse is quite common. I thought, my God, so I bought it. Did I pay too much? Why didn't anyone else buy it? But, you know, if you're confident in yourself and you've done the research and it worked out well, you know, so the daughter that I bought it with, the reason she wanted to sell it is because she got to shift into state where property prices are much higher. Yeah. But with the profit that she made from that small property, she was able to buy a good property interstate. So it worked out well for her. And for daughter number 3, it's her first step into property investment.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing that has shined through since doing that, because that was probably back in 2019.
Yeah, it was 3 years ago.
Yeah, in 2019. And what you projected to happen then, which is why I'm calling him a bit of a prophecy on many levels. Because I mean, when you're so passionate about what you do, which is clear, and you have the knowledge that you've accrued over this, decades now that you've been doing this, your accuracy in terms of what you've been able to predict is next to none.
Well, not for everything. Thank you very much for that. I'm hopeless at predicting cash rate or interest rates because I never studied macroeconomics. I know property economics. But when it comes to picking suburbs and streets, I don't want to brag, but I'm pretty good.
Well, you do have a book. Your first book.
Yeah, there it is, just behind us. Top Australian
Suburbs.
And you live in one of them and I live in one of them.
Correct. And you were very proud and happy to hear that I acquired a property in that suburb.
Very happy because one of the problems is, and I'm sure you must find it in your line of work is people have all the enthusiasm at the beginning, but then they don't follow through. And that's what I found when I was teaching the course at TAFE, which was really to teach people how to make money in property, not teaching them how to be a real estate agent or property manager, is most of them did not go on and buy property. And I think mainly because I wasn't there holding their hand and really to go borrow the money, because that's the biggest hurdle. You might be capable of borrowing it, but it's just the thought, oh my God, I've got to go into debt. Or I've got to go into debt again. Yeah. And that's what holds people back. Yeah. You need to be able to get over that.
Exactly. You need to be comfortable with that debt. I mean, there are different kinds of debt, good debt, bad debt, So if you're acquiring a property that, you buy it for $500,000 this year and next year it's going to be 300 grand more, then, well, that's good debt, isn't it? So well done. Like that's a pat on the back moment. So it was really very enlightening to see what we were learning in the classroom in terms of the suburbs you took us through and where they were then and your expectations of where they were going to go and seeing it, like literally witnessing it over the years. You don't keep it secret. You're very forthcoming with it, like Theberton, being a gentrification, like that was probably your top tip of a gentrifying area. And, in Brooklyn Park and all these areas that were close to the top suburbs that you knew were just going to be the next to boom.
Because in the end, not everyone can afford to live in a top suburb. So then they look next door. And providing it's similar in housing style and streetscape, it can take off. So my lender was the expensive suburb. Yeah. People couldn't live there. So then they looked at Torrensville. Torrensville became too expensive. So then they looked at Theberton or they looked at Brooklyn Park. And then that'll become too expensive and then they have to look somewhere else. It's that ripple effect. And it works not just in Adelaide, it works all over Australia and many parts of the world.
Yeah. There are so many beautiful things about learning the ins and outs of, property, acquiring property, rentals, thinking outside of the box, like you said, of where to acquire. Location, obviously, is something that can't be
number one.
It's number one, right? Location,
not the only thing, but it's the most important thing.
And the type of house that you buy as well. Character home, something that is. Nowadays character homes are sought after.
Yeah. Back when my mum and dad came, they were just called old homes, and I know a lot of the Greeks. They lived in the old homes in the suburbs like Unley and Parkside. And then they moved out to the new homes at Fulham Gardens, where they ripped out market gardens and built new homes. Or the Italians moved out to Campbelltown and Newton. Well, they should have stayed in Unley and Parkside and Norwood, because that's where the money's to be made, because old homes turned into character homes. No. It's a bit like, cars. All right, we call it an old car now, but you wait long enough and it's called a vintage car. Yeah. Or old furniture becomes antique furniture.
Exactly. My father had a beautiful home in Goodwood.
Oh,
I know. It pains me out because you gave me the access to look up what it was sold for. Oh my goodness, it was. I even showed him, and he couldn't believe it.
That's right. We're all geniuses in hindsight, Maria. We're all geniuses.
Well, you said you weren't able to. You don't. Your strengths aren't in picking the interest rates and things like that. Obviously that's a big topic in the moment. People are a little bit, freaking out a little bit at the increases. But I remember our conversation probably around this time last year where you said you'd actually secured your rates.
For the first time ever, and I've been borrowing money for over 30 years, I finally beat the banks by fixing an interest rate. So I think my interest rate is fixed at 2.5%.
Wow.
But I actually did, I was chatting to somebody today about interest rates, and most fixed rates are over 5%. So for the first time ever, normally when I fix, variable rate goes down, and I should have stayed with variable. But yeah, it works out well. I mean, the good thing about fixed rate is you know exactly what your repayments are every month. Normally you pay a premium for that, but there's this quirk of nature called COVID that's turned things upside down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was able to take advantage of that finally.
That was a bold move. I remember you telling me, and I was like, "Oh, are you sure you're not jumping the gun a little bit there?" And you're like, "No, you watch and you wait and see."
Yeah. And I picked the bottom without even really knowing that I'd picked the bottom. It's just that that's when I decided to make the decision. Right, we need to fix now.
Yeah.
And even though the variable rates didn't move until a few months ago, fixed rates started moving late last year, early this year.
Yeah, no, it's great. I actually, in reviewing an interview I did with my father back in 2019, he made a comment. I'm not sure if I shared it. It might have been in like some of the footage that I kept for myself, but he'd said he predicted that in the next couple of years, interest rates would be at 5%. And I was like, oh, no, don't be silly, Dad. Like, it's like 1% now. It's going to be 5%. He's like, you see. And I was like, wow, he did it again.
Yeah.
You know, because numbers was his game. He was very good at mathematics and everything like that. So listen to people who are wise, like,
yeah, I mean, people that have been through it before, like property cycles take 10 or 15 years. If you've been 2 or 3, you've got a pretty good idea what's coming. Like, you know, the cash rate and interest rates were not going to stay that low for long. We'd never had anything like a pandemic in modern history, so we'd never had interest rates that low. But as things get back to normal, so does interest rates.
Yeah. So where are we at now in the real estate cycle then?
Okay, so here we are in July 2022. I predict that nationally, property prices will be lower at the end of the year, but that's mainly driven by Sydney and Melbourne, because Sydney and Melbourne have about 50% of Australia's real estate, and so a lot of the stats are biased towards Sydney and Melbourne. And Sydney and Melbourne are already on their way down. At the other end of the scale is Brisbane and Adelaide, which have slowed down their rate of acceleration. So what you'll see at the end of this year is that Sydney and Adelaide and Brisbane will be the 2 best performing capital cities. Actually, at the end of the financial year, Adelaide was the best performing capital city. But because we still got a lot of momentum, we'll still continue to do well to the end of the year. But look, Ria, if you're going to be buying property for 10 years and holding it for 10 years or 20 years, whether you bought yesterday, today, tomorrow, next month, you know, you just have to bite the bullet and get in. And people say, oh, interest rates are going up. They are, but they've come from a very low base. You know, when we bought our first house, interest rates were 13.5%. And as amazing as it may seem, it's actually easier to pay off a mortgage today than it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I mean, it was very easy 3 months ago, but it's still quite easy. The hard part is coming up with a deposit. That's the hard part. But you just need to save or think outside the square. You know, maybe buy it with a friend or a sibling, because 50% of something is better than 100% of nothing. But you better make sure that you've got that agreement in writing. So it's a bit like a marriage. You know, a marriage is also in writing. And even when you get divorced, that's also in writing. But you need to be able to work out, if you're going to go into business, which is what buying property together is. If you're going to go into business together, you need to work out and write down how you're going to get in and write down how you're going to get out. Yeah,
exactly. And you definitely practice what you preach, and you are always trying to let us all know that the game plan is important. And it's like what you said at the very beginning of this. You said it's important to have a plan.
Yeah,
that's probably one thing that you would redo at the start of your journey.
Yeah, I would have a plan, which means you've got a goal. So you need to have a plan so you can reach the goal. For me, it was I was just an opportunist. When the opportunity came and we could afford it, we bought it.
Well, it's a bit like the example you had from your parents. It's like whatever they could get as well.
Yeah.
They understood the value.
The difference there was they had the patience to hold property. I don't. I buy and sell. You know, if I look back now, and if I kept some of the properties that we bought, you know, I'd be in a much better position. Still in a very good position now, but I just don't have the patience for that. And if I see a redevelopment opportunity, I prefer to do that rather than just buy and hold a particular house. Buying and holding property is the best way to make money in property, but it's not the only way.
It's a long-term strategy.
Yeah.
You know, and you've said to me as well, like, depending where you're at in your life, how old you are, like if you're a younger person, you might want to buy and hold, and you've got time on your hands. Whereas, you know, someone, you know, later is, like you said, it's more impatient. They want results quickly in a different way. Like they've got the money to invest. They want to see a quicker and bigger result. Yeah.
And the one thing I should have done was listen to my dad and bought earlier. So I didn't buy my first investment property till my late 20s.
Okay.
If I'd started in my early 20s, I would have caught another property cycle.
So what stopped you?
Oh, well, unlike nowadays, in my early 20s, we were seriously thinking about getting married. So I got married at 24. So starting a new job, starting a new household, and then also thinking about starting a family, because our first one was born when we were still in our 20s. Wow. And so there were other things happening in our life. You know, most people buy property to help with their retirement. In your 20s, superannuation and retirement is the last thing on your mind. But yeah, if I could turn back the clock, I would have bought it earlier. I mean, we bought our first house when I was 24 because we had to. So that, you know, I didn't totally miss out, but I could have, because it was easier to buy property because your deposit requirements were less in relation to today. All right. So it was a lot easier to actually acquire the property from a deposit point of view. It was harder to pay it off because the interest rates were so high. But hey, look, we're all geniuses in hindsight. Life's pretty good, no complaints.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know, and you know, you follow the flow of where life's directions are taking you, which sounds like it's what you were doing anyway. And everything had to happen that way because you started off that way with no plan. Now you're like emphasizing how important it is to have a plan.
Have a plan. Yeah.
So we've talked about your first book, which obviously was great because you did another seminar where we went over your statistics and the predictions. And that's why I call you a prophecy, because I could see it in the numbers, because I love graphs and numbers. And wow, it was like literally.
I remember doing a series of seminars. It was called The Property Professor or The Property Pretender. And so I put up my stats. I said, well, in 2008, which is when that first book came out, this is what the situation was. And in 10 years later, in 2018, this is what happened. And except for Perth, which was disastrous because that was going through a property bust. I mean, I didn't get 100%, but I would have given myself a high distinction. Most of it was right.
Definitely. No, it was really, really fascinating to see it all, you know, in print, so to speak. And so your second book, which was you co-authored it with
Zac Zacharia. So it's called Property versus Shares. So I wrote the property component and Zac wrote the share component, because generally most people will, if they're going to invest, it's either property or shares. Few people are investing in cryptocurrencies at the moment, but that's not going too well. So yeah, I asked Zac, because at the time we were also teaching at TAFE, we were also teaching share investment as well as property investment. So yeah, Zac wrote the share part, I wrote the property part. Very, very enjoyable. And it's not like one's better than the other. I mean, if you don't want to buy the book, the motto is you're going to have both. You don't have to have 50% in shares and 50% in property, but you should have both. And even if you don't actively invest in the share market, that's where your superannuation is. So you should take an interest in the share market, because that's where a significant component of your retirement is invested.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's an interesting read if you're that way inclined to read a book like that. And then now we've got book number 3 that's just come out.
Yeah, so I wrote a book with Margaret Lomas, who's very well known in the property world. Margaret wanted to do some developments. She's very, very smart when it comes to property investment. I call her the property princess, but didn't have a lot of experience in development. And so she wanted to do a couple of developments, one here in South Australia and one in New South Wales. And I said, yeah, I'm happy to help you out. And so she's written, it's called The Diary of a Small Developer. So she writes it like a diary. So that one part of the chapter is a diary, and then the other part is me saying, well, this went well, this didn't go so well, and if you want to do it yourself, here are some tips for you. So yeah, I was honoured to be asked to write a book with Margaret, because I greatly respect her. She was one of the pioneers in property investment. A lovely lady. And yeah, so for anyone that's interested in development, that is certainly an option. Very easy to read book. And, you know, unlike a textbook, which doesn't give you an insight into if you're going to have any hassles, there are hassles. And it was, I mean, at the time we didn't want any hassles, because we want things to go smoothly, because time is money in development. The longer it takes, the more interest you pay. But that's all detailed there. The fact that we almost had to go to court to prove our point with the council, delays with builders, hassles with neighbours, you know, it's all in there. But there's also tips on how to deal with those.
That's great. I think it's better that it didn't go smoothly.
Yeah,
because that's real life. I don't think I've known anyone who's built a home or gone through all of this. It's like, oh, it's been a really smooth run. Most people say, I'm never doing that again.
That's right, they do.
So it's a real life capture in a diary format. I love that. That's really great. So Peter, what's next for you? Are you still looking to acquire property? Are you
Oh, having said that, just before you came, I sent an email to a friend of mine who's looking to do a development, and he's looking for a joint venture partner. And I said, yeah, I'm seriously interested. We're going to have a chat tonight. Yeah. But that's short term. You know,
of course.
I'm not really interested in buying any more long-term properties. I mean, I'm 61. What's a 61-year-old doing taking out a 30-year loan? Like, what for?
Yeah.
But look, I'm happy to do that sort of speculation development stuff, but no more long-term investments. We have enough now.
Yeah. It's for the pure enjoyment of it, isn't it? Now?
Oh, and that's why I keep trading. You know, unlike my mum and dad and many other successful property investors who've just bought and hold, it's the excitement of buying something and doing something new with it, and then selling it, and all right, you know, there's the profit. All right. Now we spend some of that profit, but we also reinvest a lot of that profit into the next project.
Yeah. And I think it's good that you've illustrated that where you're at in your time of life now, long term is not, ideal. Obviously, you'll be looking at retirement. You want to live more comfortably and not have to worry about.
Retirement's looking very good, but I just have to be brave enough to leave work, because I love my work. I don't want to leave it just yet, but we'll see. I mean, it's a nice position to be in, just to go back and teach. I'd love to do, because at the moment I'm the program director, so I have to do all the administration as well. But it's a lovely choice to have.
Yeah. Well, you deserve it. You've worked hard, and everything that you've explained to us today, from your, humble beginnings of a little boy just kind of following dad around and doing what you can to, where you are now. You deserve to be in that position where you're doing it for the enjoyment, all of it. Personally and professionally. So yeah, hats off to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Rhea. That's lovely of you to say that.
So a question that I ask everyone is, what does summoning your superhuman mean to you?
What does,
summoning your superhuman mean to you?
What does summoning my superhuman mean to me? Well, I need to be motivated to do that. Because as you get older, you lose a lot of motivation to do things. But my wife says I'm very disciplined. What does summoning my superhuman mean to me? maybe we can pause and I can think about it.
Well, just think about perhaps, you know, those times where you feel like you're stuck. You know, how do you sort of summon that strength to overcome?
Oh, well, I'm generally a glass half full guy.
Okay.
I'm an optimist. And even if things are going pretty badly, or I've got a big decision to make, I just need to sleep on it. And because I'm a morning person. Yeah, sorry, I don't have a better answer, Ria.
What would be your advice then to, say, you know, the younger version of you, go back, you know, 30 years, what would be your words of wisdom that you would give to them?
Oh, actually, they're around the room. I
Yeah.
hear that. So vision, make the dreams of today become the opportunities of tomorrow. And if I turn around, destiny is not a matter of chance, it's a matter of choice. If you want something, you go for it. Now, it may not be easy, but if it was easy, everyone would be doing it, right? And so, you know, for me, I am where I am, not just because I just had a day job, right? I had a day job, but then I did extra. I wrote books. I went back to uni and studied. I wrote articles. And all of that takes time. But yeah, like a lot of things might seem impossible. You know, if we're talking about fitness, you know, I ran a marathon. And before I ran the marathon, there was no way in the world I'm going to run a marathon. And today I look back and I think, shit, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that.
No, it's fine.
Did I run a marathon? But, you know, 42 kilometers starts with the first kilometer. And I remember the first run I did, my warm-up took longer than the actual run. But I got there. You know, I've ridden my bike 1,000 kilometers over 7 days. That's hard. But, you know, the first step is ride, or maybe not 1K, ride 10Ks, ride 20, ride 50, ride 100. Baby steps, baby steps. And with any big task, you break it down into small tasks and then it seems achievable. Yeah, so look, if I was talking to my younger self, I'd say, look, you know, dream big and go for it.
Well, that's it, isn't it? That is how Peter has summoned his superhuman. You know,
there we go. Dream big and go for it.
Now he's comfortable, like he's here to, well, you know,
but you never stop dreaming because there are still opportunities out there.
Yeah.
And just because I'm 61, I mean, 60, you know, 60 is the new 50, or probably the new 40, actually. So it doesn't mean that life stops.
Yeah.
All right. It just means that you have different goals. You're like, I'm still very active. All right. I can't ride as fast as I can, but I can ride further if I want to. So, so there, just because you get to a certain stage of your life doesn't mean that you stop dreaming. Your goals may change a bit, but yeah, I think you should always have goals, but you should always have a plan in place to achieve those goals.
100%. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Peter. I think there've been so much wise words and golden nuggets that you've shared with us today. So I appreciate your time and expertise as always. So thank you very much for being here today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.